everyone. This is our supplementary lecture for the lesson on overview on research, which tackles on one of the important considerations in conducting research, no, yung tinatawag nating ethics. So this is only a supplementary lesson to help you not only understand research but also more importantly on how to conduct research within the bounds of ethical principles. Okay? So, medyo mabilis lang to. I'll try to make this fast. And I'm going to cite three examples for us to gain an understanding of what is not an ethical type of research. And then we can lobby from there kung ano yung dapat nating gawin. Okay? So first is the case of Dr. Haruko Obukata. Uh, she was considered as a rising star of the scientific community, and she also happens to be a lead author on two papers that were praised or heralded for revolutionizing the field of stem cell research. So yung kanyang research is about stop cells. I'm not sure if you have heard about stimulus-triggered activation of pluripotency cells. Ang sinasabi lang dito is that using her methodology, she can be able to convert an ordinary cell into a stem cell. Okay? So ibig sabihin, for example, if kukuha daw tayo ng cells from the tissues in our body and then gagawin natin yung ginawa niya, which is bathing the regular cells in an acid, specifically ascorbic acid solution, or applying mechanical stressors like squeezing, nagta-turn daw into stem cells yung ordinary cells. And if this is true, ang daming applications nito because if we try to recall, stem cells are cells which can be able to develop into other types of cells, di ba? So ibig sabihin, if you have the starting point, it can diverge into cell types that you want it to be. Okay? Pwede mo siyang gamitin in that way. So yung accusation na to, uh, because she claimed that stem cells can be produced, no, from ordinary cells in simple laboratory procedures. So this one was published in Nature in January, and as soon as it was published, kasi ang nangyayari sa scientific community, once you publish something that's promising, other researchers would try to replicate it. And after she published it, ni isa man lang na sumunod sa kanyang methodology, walang nakagawa. So ibig sabihin hindi reproducible yung kanyang result. And this became a major question to the scientific community. Ang dali lang ng research ng methodology niya, pero bakit hindi magawa or hindi ma-replicate ng ibang scientists? Okay? And this prompted na, yun nga, baka nagkaroon ng scientific misconduct, so nagkaroon ng in-house investigation at University of Tokyo because Dr. Obokata was a member of RIGEN. It's a very famous research institution sa Japan. It's an Institute of Physical and Chemical Research, or Rikagaku Kenkyujo in Japanese. At maraming researchers na dito who have won Nobel Prize. So, yun, in an article that was published in Nature, What Pushes Scientists to Lie, The Disturbing but Familiar Story of Dr. Haruko Bukata, sinabi nila na it may be because of the pressure na she was a scientist in a well-established, in a world-renowned research facility. And then given na babae ka in the field of science, it adds perhaps a stress kasi nga most of the researchers, especially sa Japan, in the case of Japan, talagang if you go in a laboratory, karamihan sa kanila talagang lalaki lahat. Barely you can see in the lobby na female na scientist or kahit man lang lecturer, ganun. So, this is a case of ethical considerations in research, yung fallacy na tinatawag natin sa research, or yung deliberately changing or monopolizing a result in order for us to gain benefit from it. Next is yung case ni Dr. He Jianhui, I'm not sure how it's read, but basically yung research niya is on CRISPR by making genetically altered babies. Yung CRISPR, this means yung ating clustered, regularly interspaced, short palindromic repeats. So palindromic repeats, ibig sabihin, kung ano yung pagkakabasa sa forward sequence, ganun din yung pagkakabasa sa reverse sequence. Ito naman siya ay family ng DNA sequences na nakikita sa genome ng ating prokaryotic organisms like bacteria and archaebacteria. So ang ginagawa lang dito sa CRISPR, in a nutshell, we can program a guide RNA. So meron tayong guided RNA, ipoprogram natin siya to a protein called Cas9, and then with it, the protein can now address to our targeted gene. So, ibig sabihin, yung guard RNA natin would direct the Cas9 protein and in and consequently, yung ating Cas9 protein will cut the strands of our DNA target at a correct spot like a molecular scalpel. So ang laki ng kanyang pwedeng magawa because if this is really accurate, ibig sabihin we can cut the sequence that's putative, say for example to Down syndrome or to dwarfism or to other types of genetic diseases. Okay? Yun lang yung sinasabi dito. But then again, if no matter how promising this research was, it gained the attention of the scientific community because of ethical reasons. Ethical ba na we are going to dictate how a baby would turn into given our desired characteristics? In Netflix, merong documentary nito, series actually. One of the series mentioned about this experiment na sinabi nila na yun, this research can address problems on dwarfism, on Down syndrome, and so on. Pero on the side of people who are living with Down syndrome and dwarfism, wala silang problema on what they have become based on their genetic predisposition. Meron silang problema on how the society treats them on what they have become. So, nagiging more on social yung impact ng research like this. And yun, these examples are some of the ethical considerations in research. No matter how good your research, but if it's not ethical or if it poses a huge social impact later on, then it might not be a good research in the first place. Another case of ethical considerations in research is very common nowadays, especially for technocrats, yung ating mga young generation na napakagaling sa image editing softwares, like this one, if titingnan natin yung bands, this is a gel electrophoresis result, by the way. If you are not familiar with gel electrophoresis, ang ginagawa lang nito is we separate species of DNA based on their size. So, si DNA in nature is negatively charged, di ba? Alam natin yun because of the negative charge imparted by their phosphate backbone. So, if we try to run current from positive here to the negative down here, what happens to DNA? DNA would move away from the anode side going to the positive side from the negative side. Kasi nga, negatively charged DNA, positive dito, it will traverse going down. Okay? So, ang pinapakita lang dito is, yung nakabox daw, yung pairs daw nito, it looks exactly the same. No? And it becomes ambiguous because if you have tried conducting gel electrophoresis experiment by running PCR products, napaka-imposible for bands to look exactly the same. Tingnan nyo yung level of similarity, no, ng dalawang bands ito. 100% the same. So, sinasabi dito na paper, this paper was published and then later on, it was retracted. Retracted, ibig sabihin, the author was notified na to pull out their paper or his paper kasi there were allegations of scientific misconduct. So these are some examples of ethical considerations in research na we can look into. Okay? So given these examples, it seems na napaka-importante ng understanding ng ethics in research. It is sometimes referred to as common sense. However, we can see from these examples that ethical disputes and issues that are present today may not be as common. Siguro dahil to sa difference in values, in life experiences. For example, yung first situation natin na baka lang no may pressure kay Dr. Obokata to gain a good stance in research given na babae siya and given na she is affiliated to a world-renowned research institution. So hindi natin alam, but these are speculations. Okay? Which will later on lead to varied interpretation of what a good research is or not. Or some people might abide with the concept of Machiavelli. Di ba? Familiar sa atin yung sa social science, yung the end justifies the mean, na kahit anong proseso pa yan, basta ang final output ko ay maganda, then that should explain the rest of the process. Di ba? So, that's why it's a very important concept in studying research because it's not as direct as a law. Unlike yung law, pag sinabing batas, talagang pag wala sa batas, hindi na siya tama. But for ethics, there can be many gray areas na pwedeng magkaroon ng dispute yung one team of research with the another. Okay? So as stated earlier, yung ating ethical norms or standards are the expected, acceptable ways of how people should behave in conducting experiments. But this does not mean it's true for another. So yung andito lang sa akin, yung sa lesson lang na to, at least we come up with some common grounds on why research is important at ano yung ethical codes that we need to follow when conducting research. Okay? Importance of research, I only listed 5 here. I'm sure there are a lot of possible importance of research, pero for the sake of this lesson, let's only tackle 5. No? Yung aim ng research, very important. This means that truth and error avoidance should be promoted by prohibiting fabrication, falsification, and misrepresentation of research data. Kasi yung falsification naman or fabrication, it may be unintentional or not, especially if you are the type of researcher who does not take note. As I told you in the first lesson, the research has to be reproducible. So kapag nagawa mo siya first time, second time, third time, fourth time, the same pa din yung result, then that should be a good result. Okay? But if nag-fluctuate yung inyong data, then that means to say there is something wrong with your methodology. That is why it's really important for you to take notes, the smallest details as possible, especially if you're going to do a series of research or experiments. So it's really important for you to take notes. Okay? Next, it promotes values that are vital for collaborative work, especially for research works that are interdisciplinary. For example, in our case, bioinformatics. Bioinformatics would require a computational background or mathematical background and also biological background. So, hindi lahat ng parts ng research mo can be only done by your team because if your team is only doing on molecular biology and you need a heavy background on computational field, then you need to ask other researchers to help you. So doon pumapasok yung essence of collaborative work in research. That is why as early as now, you were tasked to group yourselves. Although alam naman natin na kahit mag 1:1 ratio tayo ng research output is to research students sa PSI, you all can deliver. Pero at this point in time, dapat ma-realize natin na research, for it to be successful later on, would be collaborative. Talagang kailangan maging collaborative siya. Okay? Because it would require different people from various backgrounds wherein you can trust the other end and then yun, may mutual respect and merong fairness in terms of the amount of work that has been contributed. Okay? Next is it ensures researchers can be held accountable to the public, especially if your research would be used in the policy making. For example, when we delineated yung sardine ban, for example, nagsabi ka na yung research output ko tells that we should stop fishing tuna kasi yung tuna natin ay nagde-decline na. So, ibig sabihin, your research will be used for policy making, no? At the local government level na sinasabi mo na we should not catch tuna anymore because bababa yung catch natin ng tuna later on. So, if you are not certain or hindi tama yung magiging baseline data for at the policy level, then ibig sabihin, maapektuhan din yung direct users ng resources na to. For example, yung ating mga municipal fisher folk na heavily nagde-depend on their catch, no? For daily sustenance, to feed their families, and then you are just going to say na we need to stop, we need to halt fishing operations in this point, parang ganun. So, ang sinasabi lang ng part na to is that researchers should be held accountable to the public for whatever consequences of their research outputs are. Okay? And in turn, if we can establish that researchers can be held accountable, then we can build public trust and support for our research. Supposedly, research should go hand in hand with the industry. In Japan, for example, the research and division section of, for example, a business is linked to an academic institution. So, ang ginagawa is, si business unit will supply the demands of the research to be conducted. In return, si academic unit naman will do the research and then it will feed the business unit the output of the research. So, in that way, nagiging mas kapaki-pakinabang yung ating research. Hindi lang siya secluded on the premises of submission or completion of your degree and so on, but nagiging tangible siya. Pwede siyang magamit ng industry. And si industry naman, since nagagamit niya, pwede niyang pagpasalamatan yung academic unit by establishing a link. So, siya yung nagsusupply ng money to finance the research. Yung research outputs naman will be fed to the business unit. Okay? But in the Philippines, I know this is very utopic, no? Very, ano pa lang siya, tawag dyan, very ideal, kumbaga. But sooner or later, I hope we can get into that hierarchy of research. And lastly, research is important because it promotes a variety of important moral and social values. So yung values na to would include human and animal rights, our social responsibility, our health and safety, and compliance with the law. Okay? So here are some of the ethical codes that we need to follow when doing research. So related lang din to siya sa ating earlier examples and then yung ating diniscuss a while ago na importance of research. So honesty, alam na natin yan. Yung truthfully reporting data, whether it's intentional or not unintentional, dapat we always have to exercise honesty in conducting research. Objectivity, it's by avoiding or minimizing bias. Ibig sabihin na as much as possible, we should not introduce any bias, especially for repeated experiments, para din maging consistent tayo sa ating result. This also includes disclosing any conflict of interest that can influence one's research. Because, for example, if a group of researchers are doing experiments on molecular bio, more often than not, may ibang researches na ginagawa nyo na, tapos at the same time, ginagawa din ng iba. So, doon nagkakaroon ng conflict of interest if you will disclose, say, for example, the results of your research to another researchers with this same vested interest. Integrity, being a man of one's word, it's by acting sincerely, so it's more of personal na, no? More of the consistency of thought and action. Next important part of research is attention to detail. So, avoiding preventable errors and then negligence on your part. Of course, kung first time nyo, talagang usually research kasi para siyang ano, baptism of fire. I would I would describe it like that. Para siyang baptism of fire na talagang sa umpisa, hindi mo alam anong gagawin mo, and then you will be loaded with all types of research, and then from that cloud of problems, you will pick what you can work on, and then later on, and you will develop the values of a researcher as you go along the process. Parang ganun yung ano, in my case, ganun yung na-experience ko. So, yun. Next, openness. Openness is being open-minded in receiving criticisms and new ideas. It's also very important, especially if you are stuck on a dead end of your research, and then you're going to need output from your colleagues. And there are times talaga na your your colleagues in research will help you improve further your research. So that's why it has to be open. You have to be also open-minded, and regard for intellectual property. So respecting copyrights, patents, and other forms of intellectual property. Uh, yung sa research one, for example, um, that's why we are asked to cite our references. And then for methods also, if you are going to adopt a method, you always have to mention kung saan siya galing, kung anong year, and so on. Okay? Confidentiality is being able to protect confidential information and communication, like classified military information or patient records, pero hindi na siya part siguro masyado for research that we are going to make. Social responsibility, advocating the good of all as well as prevention of any harm. Okay? Legality, of course, your research should not breach the law, parang ganun yung sinasabi dito. Animal welfare, if you are going to use animals as your subject, you should show proper care and respect to animals in research. If, for example, you're using frog or mouse, yung alam nating sentient animals, yung capable of sensing emotion and feelings, then you have to do it the right way, that is by euthanasia, or yung ating mercy killing na tinatawag. So just like how you dissect a frog, the proper way to do it is to first uh, uh, tawag dyan, first you have to insert the needle, and then you are going to destroy the brain para hindi niya ma-feel yung sensation na yung kinakat siya, yung ganun. Medyo gore, no? Pero that's the reality behind it. And then safety human subjects, of course, minimizing risk and harm to maximize benefits to human subjects, respect to human dignity, autonomy, and privacy by getting the consent of research participants. This is in the case if you're going to use human subjects, no, for research. An example pala nito na gusto kong sabihin, yung kay Hila Cell, kay Henrietta Lacks, yung first immortalized cells from the patient named Henrietta Lacks, na kung saan meron siyang, was it ovarian cancer or liver cancer? I'm not sure which of the two. But yeah, the point is meron siyang tissues that were, the tissues uh, were derived from a cancer patient, and then uh, it, it was spliced from the patient's body, and then pinadami siya sa lab. So naging issue doon was that hindi nagkaroon ng consent si doctor at saka si patient that her tissues will be going to use for research. Although yung research na to, no, until now we have all benefited because of that research, pero yun pa din yung consent yung hindi na established during the protocol daw, sabi. Okay? So that's it for this lecture. Again, this is a supplemental lecture. You can listen to this to add up to your to our lesson on overview of research. And if you happen to have any questions or concerns, please let me know by sending me a message. Okay? Thank you very much.